Don't you hate it when people answer their own questions? I do. Right, as part of the spec there at the top, an example of how urban planning is improving the quality of life of the urban poor. Obviously, we've been studying Mumbai, so we'll stick with that city. We're going to look at the Vision Mumbai project, which actually incorporates several other projects, of which we will study two. The likelihood is this question, if it comes up in the exams in paper 2, it is likely to be a to what extent an evaluate or a discuss style 9 or 6 mark question. Although the exam board isn't specifically asking for that in the spec, they've certainly done that on their specimen assessment materials, and as a result we need to be aware of both positives and negatives of this scheme relating to quality of life of the urban poor. In terms of quality of life, if you get a quality of life question or an impacts on people question, please make sure you use that CAPS rule. Either comfort, access to opportunities, privacy or safety needs to be in your answer to make it specific. If you don't put one of those in, there is a risk that your answer will be considered generic. Now, just before we move on, probably the most common one that you can use is access to opportunities. If people have either an increase or decrease in disposable income or an increase and decrease in leisure time, that will equate to either an increase or decrease in their access to opportunities. You must give an example opportunity that the person can or cannot do as a result of having more or less money. Please, please, please use CAPS in your answer. The ability to use it in itself will probably be worth 1 out of 3 marks. The explanation that goes along with it will automatically be specific on the basis that you are offering that level of detail you're going to need to use. So CAPS, absolutely crucial to use. We're going to focus on Dharavi, that slum, 1 square mile in area, 1 million people living there. And what we've got to consider with this, or with any plan to improve the area, is what you want to maintain or keep about Dharavi and what you need to improve. So we start with the improve section. It's probably easier to picture that. Your council, your government, if you will, want to improve the clean water provision, the electricity provision, the amount of people in formal tax-paying jobs, the access to services, e.g. water, electricity, healthcare, education, etc., the ability to collect waste, and the size and quality of accommodation. That needs to be improved to improve people's quality of life. Taking one example, clean water provision. If you can provide people clean water, that therefore means they are less likely to get cholera and typhoid, and as a result their safety, there's your use of CAPS, safety is improved, so therefore a higher quality of life. However, Dharavi is not all bad. Dharavi has many aspects that we envy in the West, or in the UK, if you will, regarding sense of community. As an example, the people in Dharavi consider this their home and have actually formed their own communities, their own, for example, neighbourhood watch, their own festivals, their own leisure activities, leisure teams, sports teams, etc. has been created in Dharavi by the residents themselves. They have done their own bottom-up redevelopment that has been arguably very successful in this term, or in this field, on the basis of providing communal seating areas, flower pots, etc., etc., to make the area more aesthetically pleasing. Furthermore, entrepreneurship. We've got a lot of business opening, a lot of manufacturing, your single room factories opening here, which is all leading to this claim that actually this area does have some real positives that you want to maintain if you're going to redevelop it. I guess linked to the sense of community, the individuality of the place. It's a place where the local people feel very happy to live there, and that's why there's actually been so much protest against some of these plans we're going to study in this video. So the scheme Vision Mumbai, very convenient for us that it's named this, obviously the same name as our other case study of a HIC redevelopment, Vision Plymouth. Now there are 4 parts of this scheme. Oh, actually there's more than 4, there's 4 that we could potentially study. We're going to study the top 2 there in green. We're not going to study the bottom 2, simply because there isn't a great deal of evaluation that can be done here. In terms of slum sanitation scheme, that would be the concept of putting in communal toilets. That would be the concept of ensuring that waste is collected and finding a scheme to essentially move rubbish to the outskirts of Dharavi that the residents do, and then the council collects it. Likewise, electrification project, you can probably work out what that is. It's the idea of actually getting a planner to go in and work out how he can give electricity to these houses, e.g. Solar panels, as an example. The concept there is actually there isn't a great deal of valuation beyond the concept of people having to walk the rubbish to the edge of the suburb, or alternatively having to pay for the installation and upkeep of the solar panels. And as a result of that, we're going to focus on the two bullet points above, simply because there's just a little bit more to talk about. Don't get me wrong, if you want to go for the two black bullet points on an explain question, then feel free. They are relatively straightforward to do. You will have to look up some of the specifics, though, regarding both of those schemes. So just the same as the Vision Plymouth video, if you've already seen that one, there are essentially two projects within Vision Mumbai that we're going to consider, and we're going to try and work out as we go what was the aim of the project. We'll work out if it's a success, if there were winners, losers, and really importantly, we're going to try and link it to that keyword on the board, sustainable. Is this project sustainable? Now, in terms of the aim, actually I can probably do that now. The aim is to improve the quality of life of the urban poor of all of these schemes. For us in the exam, don't get me wrong, there are other aims, but the one that we're interested in is improving the lives of the urban poor. Up on the board now, you can see Dharavi as it currently stands. 1 square mile of 1 million inhabitants living in largely unsuitable or squalid conditions. The Mumbai Slum resettlement plan is quite simply to take this photo and change it into an area that looks like this, replacing the current slum informal housing, the illegal settlement, by quite simply bulldozing it, and then redevelopment. Remember, the removal of existing buildings to build or to place new buildings in its place, is to replace it with these high quality, high rise flats. Now, in terms of the differences here, we've gone from informal housing to formal housing. They will have a plan, it will have space for roads, it will have piped water and flush toilets and internet, and all the services and infrastructure of the city will be able to access this area. For example, the waste collection, electricity, schools would move into the area as well. It would mean flattening the existing area of Dharavi. Now then, in terms of these flats here, they are going to charge a very high rent. They're in a prime position, prime land, 10 kilometres north and south of both CBDs of Mumbai, and the value of the land will be very high. As a result, the average people living in Dharavi will simply not be able to afford to live in these flats at all. This is not being built for the urban poor. This is being built for the emerging middle classes and the existing upper classes in India. Just some aspects of the design here. Solar panels used to generate electricity. That could obviously be linked to reducing the carbon emissions. The air source heat as well are likely, the same sort of explanation there regarding if you heat water using natural heat in the atmosphere, it means you don't have to use electricity to do that, so again reducing the carbon emissions. CCTV outside to improve the residents' quality of life. Now, there are some residents who will actually get some existing residents from Dharavi who will actually be relocated into these flats and will actually have them rent free. That's going to equate to around about 10,000 people. Now, 10,000 people out of 1 million is not a great deal. It's essentially 1%. However, that is a group of people you can talk about here to say the minority of people, which is simply going to be done in essentially a random draw, could actually have their quality of life hugely improved on the basis of this formal accommodation that's going to be provided. So a very small number will actually benefit from this. Now, in terms of a slum resettlement project, you've done half of it of destroying the slum. You're then going to have to relocate these people, and the place that they're going to be relocated to is actually the suburbs of the city of Mumbai. What Mumbai City Council has decided is to actually build these type of high-rise small flats in the suburbs on cheaper land for the current residents of Dharavi. Now, some really important facts quickly. 10,000 residents have been relocated into this style of flats. And the qualification period, or the qualifying criteria, I should say, is if you've lived in Dharavi since 1995 and can prove that, then you are entitled to move into one of these flats. Now, these flats will be charged rent, but quite a low amount of rent, which is obviously one impact on quality of life we need to be aware of, because the current informal settlements in Dharavi, the residents don't pay any rent on. So we've got these new flats being built in the suburbs. Now, firstly, I want you to look at those kind of really basic block flats. They are concrete, utilitarian high-rise flats, similar to what was being built in the United Kingdom between 1950 and 1960 in the post-war period. They do, however, have some real big bonuses in terms of quality of life for the people who do end up living here. The concrete walls are watertight. Now, if they're watertight, that means water cannot get into the flat. It means it's not damp, it's not mouldy, it's not going to attract flies into the property with the potential of contaminating food. Therefore, the spread of E. coli is reduced. Secondly, we do have flush toilets connected to a sewerage system. That therefore means that it is less likely that your drinking water, which is also piped into the building here, will be contaminated, and therefore there's less risk of cholera and typhoid. Remember, previously in Dharavi, the water pipes literally run through areas of just sewage and chemical waste, which had the risk, if they ever cracked, to be polluted in that way or contaminated. If you've got flush toilets and a pipe water source, that's far less likely to occur. Furthermore, if you've got flush toilets, it's not going to smell as bad in the area, and you also reduce open defecation as well. Hopefully that might also have the impact of reducing rat numbers slightly in the area. Furthermore, roofs can be used as a communal area. That's the idea of trying to maintain what they had what the residents built themselves, essentially in Dharavi, that sense of community. Furthermore, something you can't see well in either of the images actually is that amongst these flats there's going to be open spaces dedicated to, for example, cricket pitches, to ensure that this community feel and these people will continue to essentially interact with each other and trying to make it what we call socially sustainable, so people will still wish to live here and upkeep the area in the future. On the flip side, there are some negatives as well. The flats are very small. They're only about 3 metres squared, and as a result, you could argue that it actually doesn't really increase residents' privacy at all. Considering that 5 people are likely to live in these flats at a time, it's going to be very cramped. Again, you've got the argument that actually airborne disease will spread very quickly in those conditions. The residents do have to pay rent here. It's going to cost the government upwards of tens of millions of pounds to build all these flats, and with that in mind, your residents are going to have to pay for it. Now, the problem here is simply the residents' disposable income decreases. In Dharavi, they didn't have to pay rent. Now they do have to pay rent, they will have less disposable income, and as a result less access to opportunities, e.g. sending the children to school, and therefore those children can expect a lower quality of life in the future. The final one's a bit tricky. Sunlight cannot reach the ground between the blocks. That gives people living here the risk of a deficiency in vitamin D, which can lead to diseases such as rickets. The concept here is actually in Dharavi, the buildings weren't high-rise, so actually, although it was very dark between the buildings, generally natural light could hit the ground in certain places. Here, however, it's very dark on the ground level, simply because the tall buildings literally block the sunlight out. So it's a tricky one, this. There is some health issues that come about with this, and arguably, possibly some crime issues as well, really, on the basis that people cannot be seen well during the day, and particularly at night, and as a result of that, maybe they feel that they could get away with crimes more living here than perhaps they did previously. Okay then, in that example, the slum resettlement scheme, has it improved people's quality of life? Well, I think we can probably agree with this one that the safety is clearly improved. You have clean piped water, there's less chance of residents cutting themselves on metal or tripping over obstacles as it was in Dharavi previously, and there's definitely less risk of kerosene fires here on the basis that electricity will actually be provided to the flats. I'd probably also argue that comfort has probably been improved as well. There's going to be less noise from those single room factories, less issue of air quality and concerns with asthma or bronchitis. However, I think arguably the access to opportunities may well have decreased. Despite the fact that cricket's pitches have been installed there and we've got a communal area already planned in, the amount of disposable income lost is going to be quite massive for these people. Not only are they going to have to pay rent, but they're also going to have to figure out some way of getting into the CBD or inner city again to do their jobs, whether it be those secondary small-scale manufacturing jobs, or even if it's one of the more highly skilled jobs, for example, with Volkswagen. The people are going to have to get themselves into the city. That's going to cost them a lot more money. Their wages are not going to increase. That therefore reduces their disposable income. Furthermore, their leisure time also decreases on the basis that they have to travel to places now. Previously in Dharavi, residents would have worked very, very close to their house. The factories were almost built within Dharavi. That, for example, the people making pots or the suitcase rollers. Now, those businesses, one, have been destroyed and will have to be reset up during the redevelopment. And two, the people are now going to have to actually travel to those places, therefore reducing leisure time. Privacy, I would probably argue here that actually privacy is probably increased on the basis that houses aren't going to be used as a cut-through like they are in Dharavi so much. The properly structured walls without the ability to look in would probably increase people's privacy. Is this project sustainable? Difficult one, this. Probably from a social standpoint, the argument that the people would be safer is probably going to be outweighed by the fact that actually they might not be able to afford to live here on the basis that their economic opportunities are now more limited. Environmentally, probably yes. However, possibly not so much for the urban poor. If we consider the area that's been redeveloped, this inner city location will clearly have improved aesthetics from the informal Dharavi settlement to this new high-rise, modern, expensive flats. It will obviously also reduce the amount of pollution in the Mithi River because you've now got flush toilets and people aren't going to be open defecating into the river anymore. However, the improvements in this location don't really benefit the urban poor at all. They benefit the urban rich. Their views have been improved, if you will. There is more accommodation available for rich people to buy in Mumbai. Your poorer people, probably... I mean, you can still argue that they benefit as the slums have a better air quality and arguably better aesthetics, but, you know, I think this redevelopment project, if you will, it has the target of improving the quality of life of the urban poor, might actually do more for the urban rich than the urban poor. If you had an evaluation question, the concept that the rich benefit more would be top level evaluation to make regarding the slum resettlement scheme. Right, the second part of Vision Plymouth we're going to look at is your transport project, Mumbai Urban Transport Project. Mumbai has huge transport issues. Huge transport issues. 3 times the number of passengers on Mumbai trains during peak or rush hour points. Simply the reason why is, for a population of 24 million that's tripled in the last 40 years, there simply isn't the infrastructure to actually transport that number of people who need to commute into work. Overcrowding makes it incredibly difficult for people to move around the city, and is also very unsafe, as you're about to see with some of these images. In Mumbai, local trains have killed more people than terrorist attacks. 13 people die on one day. Travelling in that sort of fashion on the edge of a train is obviously not particularly safe, and the reason they're doing that isn't by choice. It's either by not being able to afford a ticket for it, or simply the train being so busy it's the only way that they can travel. And what we have there is 1,651 people lost their lives while crossing the tracks. This simply isn't good enough for the second largest city in the world and the largest and most important financial city in India. What this means is the city has a dedicated strategy to try to put this right, to try and improve its public transport image and try to improve the safety of its people. The schemes that have been used are actually identified here. And something to be aware of, there are schemes in place or projects planned to build a monorail through Dharavi, to build extra lines, to put extra trains on those future lines to be built. But currently, that just simply isn't possible on the basis that the trains are already running at maximum capacity, and already the maximum number of trains that can possibly run on these train lines are currently running on them, and as a result that isn't feasible without a large scale redevelopment project that's currently only in its planning phase. What has been done through the Vision Mumbai scheme is up on the board here. So if we take a couple of these in turn, we'll take the top one because it's probably the most complicated. If you encourage business to offer flexi hours, what this will mean is that there'll be less people travelling at rush hours, and as a result that should reduce the overcrowding, the risk of overheating, dehydration on these trains. So that's a concept. That one links to safety. Improve the toilet facilities, obviously linking to safety on the basis that you're going to have less risk of cholera, less risk of attracting flies to the train and therefore spreading disease by contaminating food, for example. Increasing the platform length. Concept there is you should have less people essentially falling off or being pushed off the platforms, being hit by the trains. Ventilation linked to the previous point regarding overheating, overcrowding. And the fitting proper doors one, that has actually applied to Mumbai trains already. That's the concept. We have them already in this country. Those of you who travel on a train recently, you'll probably be familiar with the beeping sound and then the train door closing. They've actually been installed on some of the Mumbai trains already, and it stops the train travelling if anyone is in that area, blocking the door from closing. That therefore means less people will fall off the train, essentially. Okay then, overall, has the urban transport project been a success? Well, it is only in its infancy. We've got a lot of building work still to be completed regarding the monorail, which I mentioned earlier. But currently, regarding the train concept, there are still a lot of deaths on the train, as proven by that previous slide. However, these improvements, if you will, should cause less deaths in the future on the basis that it should be less cramped, and you should therefore have less overheating, less dehydration. Obviously the journey is also going to be a lot safer if people aren't travelling on top or hanging out of the train, so therefore there should be less deaths concerned or less deaths happening as a result. In terms of access to opportunities, I guess this is the complicated one really, because the people using these trains aren't travelling on top of the train as choice for the fresh air or for the view. They're doing it out of necessity because they have to use the train to get to wherever they're going to work, to earn money, to support their families, and from Mumbai City Council point of view, they need them to travel to pay the rent or pay taxes as well, I should say. So is this going to work? Is this improving people's access to opportunities? Arguably no, on the basis that actually if a train now cannot travel overcrowded, which they have done in the past, that means less people simply are working in Mumbai and less tax will be paid. Less people are less able to get to work. Is this project sustainable? Well, actually, simple argument here, the continuously rising population means any transport scheme could be identified as unsustainable in the city, because it will just constantly be challenged with this increasing number of people and the increasing number of people who need to use this service. Hope that video makes sense. Come and see us down in H7 if you're not sure regarding the Vision Mumbai redevelopment scheme.